And what's happening on the earth, so I talked in the first segment about we are waking up. And I talked a little bit about we're not the only ones waking up. Ancestors are waking up. The stones are waking up. The trees are waking up. The animals are waking up. So the whole level of consciousness is waking up. The dimensions that we talk about is, and it's interesting, somebody had asked me if I had heard of somebody before, I think some names. You have to understand in my training in the way that I train my students is you get all your information in meditation. So I remember the first time, it was probably about 10 years into it, that someone said, wow, what you're talking about is exactly what Carolyn Myss says. And that's exactly, you're saying exactly what she said. And I was like, Carolyn who? So I had never heard of Carolyn Myss. So it's actually not uncommon for me not to know who some of these writers are, because whenever I get information, I'm getting it from my guides. I'm getting the information. So we have that common theme of consciousness that we can all tap into, but the only way really that you can tap into that is through meditation and getting the information from your own energy system. And I do want to talk about the word psychic, because we've talked about this quite a bit. Psychic, the Greek word for psychic means soul. So a psychic is an individual who works at the soul level with people, and they tap into the soul level. So a psychic reader is a reader of the soul. But in many of the writings, it's like, especially in the beginning, they would talk about how we are all in the third dimension. So like this table is in the third dimension, it's solid. This chair is in the third dimension. So everything that we can see and touch and feel, the clothes on our body, our physical bodies, it's all made of energy, but it's of a slower moving energy so that it can maintain its solid form. And so when we're talking about living in the third dimensional, or we're third dimensional beings, that's where we believe that everything that we can see, touch, know, experience is real, and everything else is not real. So that's pretty much third dimensional thinking. You'll hear a lot and read a lot about that we're moving to the fifth dimension. And even the song, The Age of Aquarius, you had a singing group called The Fifth Dimension. And in The Age of Aquarius, which we just started entering into this year, is bringing in that level of third dimension. And so when I would hear people talk or write about it, they were talking about, I laugh because it's like, well, some of you are going to stay in the third dimension. You just are not going to be able to make the leap. And then there are going to be others who make it to the fifth dimension. So that's really where we're going, from the third to the fifth dimension. And then I remember visiting Glastonbury, England, and being told that Glastonbury, England has always been in the fifth dimension. So if you're a third dimensional being and you go to visit Glastonbury, England, then your vibration goes up really high, and there's otherworldly experiences that happen. Or like Sedona in Arizona is considered a place that is in the fifth dimension. Now this is 20 years ago information. This is not new information in the people who are doing a lot of spiritual work. And so what they were saying was the whole planet was moving to that state of the fifth dimension. So there's a lot of questions about what that actually means. And the reason why I laugh is because we're all going to maintain the third dimension, and we're all going to maintain the fourth dimension. It's just that then we're going to be aware. The fifth dimension has always existed. We just haven't been aware of the fifth dimension. So then Kim Seer is a really good friend of mine. She's a great teacher. So I love how she describes this dimensional shift. So way back when, 1940s, or I don't even know when radio was invented, we had AM radio stations. FM stations didn't exist. It was just AM radio, and it could actually, you know, go out through the radio towers a certain mileage, you know, but it couldn't go much further than that. And so we understood things just at that AM frequency, for example. And then all of a sudden, the FM frequency came in. Well, the AM frequency didn't go away. We just now had the option. We could choose to listen to AM radio now. We can choose to listen to FM radio. So those are two different frequencies, two different sound waves. And then you have HD, and now what do we have? Super HD. And so we talk about those, that would be like AM would be at the third, FM would be at the fourth, and then the fifth would be like HD, where we're able to, even when you watch a television that's HD, it's not flat like it used to be, just black and white, or it used to just look like a flat images, like you'd be looking at a drawing on a piece of paper. But then as HD started coming in, then it's like you look at the television, you can almost see a different depth. So the difference is, for example, in seeing the trees, where before you would see a tree, and for me, this is how I would describe it, it looks like a flat landscape. Like you just look and it's like, okay, you can see trees, you can see the mountains, but it almost looks like a photograph. It's pretty flat. So that's about a third dimensional view. But now what's happening is you can look at the tree and it's almost like you can see the back at the same time you can see the front. You can see that it's round and you can see the depth to it. And so I invite you to go out and look at trees and look at the landscape and start paying attention, because that's when you're going to start noticing that you are energetically shifting. When it's like, wow, there's so much depth. Like you could just see forever, and that you can even see what's on the other side of the hill. So what I realized was it wasn't that, it wasn't a hierarchical sort of thing. It isn't like, oh, you're a third dimension person and I'm a fifth dimension person. And that's kind of how it was being described, like, well, I'm going to be enlightened by Friday because I've been meditating every day. And you're just going to hang out in the third dimension. Well, that's not the way it's happening. I've seen people who've been meditating for 40 years, and then you just watch somebody else just come up and all of a sudden they just have this higher level of awareness that they've never meditated before. So it's a vibrational shift that's happening on the planet. What it means is more information is available to you. You don't just have the third dimension available to you. You now have the fourth and the fifth dimension available to you. What begins to happen is what you see in the chairs, or you see a tree, or you see a table, or a lamp, but now sometimes you can look at it and it's almost like you can see a shimmer of energy around it. So we will begin to see that. But if you don't know that that's a possibility, it's kind of easy to remain a, what's in the Harry Potter movie? Muggle. It's easy to remain a muggle unless you realize the magic that's available and the magic that's around you. As the dimensions go up, though, we do have a spiritual world that lives right next to our world. And so there's stores, and there's houses, and there's transportation, and there's other spiritual beings. And it's like they're at one dimension, and they can see their dimension. And then we're at one dimension, we can see our dimension, but the two dimensions can't see each other. And as our dimension raises, we will begin to see the spirit world at the same time we see the physical world. So for me, I have the ability to see that world. I'm kind of the way maker. That's kind of one of my jobs, is just to tell what the potential is. But I do know that everyone is going to be able to start seeing things. So it's important for me to talk about it, so that when you start having those experiences, it's like, oh, no problem, piece of cake. I'm just shifting my, my energetic makeup is shifting to a fifth dimension, a wider potential for myself. So I always like to talk about all this stuff to kind of, I don't want to take the magic out of it, because magic's a beautiful thing, but I do want to take the fear out of it, and the, like, you're not going to get left behind. That's this feeling, I'm going to get left behind, I need to meditate. And it's like, no, you're not going to get left behind. No one's going to get left behind.